Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Jo Bavington-Jones studied English and American literature from the University of Kent at Canterbury here in the UK, and she's always wanted to be a writer and make people laugh. But while pursuing that aim, Jo has also worked as a quality assurance officer and events manager for a Texan fitness celebrity. Having experienced the highs and lows of marriage, motherhood and divorce, Jo has a wealth of life experience which she brings to her writing with realism and humour. The push Jo needed to start writing came when she was made redundant. Jo quickly realised she wanted to develop a female character who real women could truly identify with. Jo was signed by James Essinger at the Canterbury Literary Agency, and her first novel, Lucy Shaw's Not Sure, was published in October 2017, with the sequel, Lucy Shaw Wants More, following in May 2019, both books being published by the Conrad Press. Jo now lives in Folkestone on the Kent coast with her photographer partner and was inspired by her local writing group and the Triennial Arts exhibition to pen her first crime novel, The Right Way to Die. Jo's fourth novel, A Giraffe Thing, is a compelling tale of a dysfunctional family, of love and loss, and a secret that threatens to wreck lives. Book 5, The Bonfire Buddleia, a serious story of three sisters, historic abuse, and a missing girl, is due for publication this summer, 2022. Jo is currently writing the sequel to The Right Way to Die, which will be out next year. So let's find out a little bit more about Jo, her journey to writing, and why she absolutely believes that events, live events or online events, whether it be a book group, a book festival, a food festival, at your local library, wherever it might be, these are great ways of getting your name known, getting your books known, finding buyers, and just broadening your reach in a fun and non-salesy way. So let's chat more with Jo. Well, Jo, thank you so much for joining me today. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Emma. I'm very pleased to meet you and excited.
Oh, it's a pleasure, a pleasure. Well, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about your journey to writing and how you got to where you are.
Yes, of course. Well, I was a bit of a late bloomer. I always wanted to be a writer, but I think life got in the way. You know, you have to pay the bills, you get married, you have a child. Writing is the last thing on your mind. So it wasn't until 2016 when I was made redundant. I think I was 49. My son had started school and I thought, right, if you're going to do it, it's got to be now. So I set about writing a novel. And as most new writers will find, you send it out into the world to be judged and all you get back is rejection. And for a while you think, okay, this isn't going to work, and you put it back in the drawer. But I knew that I'd regret it if I didn't pursue it. So at the time I was very single and I was on a dating site and I happened to scroll past someone who said he was a literary agent. I know, shameless, but yeah. He actually became my literary agent. And I hasten to add, it only cost me a cup of tea. And then he couldn't sell the book either. So again, I'm thinking, why do I bother? You know, there's just no traditional deals out there. But in the meantime, my agent had actually started his own publishing firm. So it's actually a subsidy publisher. And at first I thought, no, why would I pay to have my book published? But as I've learned, and as many new writers will be finding, traditional publishing deals are as scarce as hen's teeth, and advances are pretty much a thing of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I swallowed my pride, and I paid to have my book published. And I kind of consoled myself with the idea that it wasn't a vanity, because the book had to be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't publish
anything. I just stop you there for a moment? So that's a term I've not heard before, subsidy publisher. So is that the same as a hybrid?
It is, yes. Yeah. Oh. So we basically share the costs, but they do all of the hard work for you. So they get the book typeset, they get a beautiful cover designed, they do all the behind the scenes work, getting the book on Amazon, the ebook. So all I had to do was write the book and hand it over with a few quid. But it was worth it, because otherwise I don't think I would have been published. And I'm currently writing book 6.
Oh, wow. So
for me, it's worked.
I think that's a really interesting delineation that you've made there, that it's not, doing a hybrid is not the same as vanity publishing, where you pay an amount of money, they give you the book, and then you do with it what you want. But the hybrid, it really is a publishing house.
Yes.
And you're just kind of, rather than them taking all of the royalties to begin with, you just kind of pay up front, and then... That's
right. So I get all the royalties until I've got my money back.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, it's a good deal at the end of the day. And if the alternative is to self-publish or never be published, then I'm all for it. Mm-hmm. I know there's still a certain stigma and snobbery around these hybrid publishers, but they really are filling a gap, I think, between traditional and vanity that I think is invaluable for a lot of writers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear as well around them, because we hear so many mixed stories. Some people feeling that you get ripped off, others having a really positive experience with it, like yourself. So I wonder if it is, rather than, or I'm sure there is a little bit of snobbery around it, but I do also think that there probably is a bit of fear about being taken for a ride, basically.
Yes, I'm sure that's certainly true. And I think a lot of clients who speak to my publisher, they say, oh no, I don't want to pay to have my book published, I'll go elsewhere. And they try and go elsewhere and realise there is no other option unless you're prepared to go through the self-publishing process. Mm-hmm. And they do come back to us at the Conrad Press. But yeah, it's not what we want to do. We want to write our books and send them out into the world, and we want to make money from them. But realistically, you've got to write because you love to write. Making a living from it has got to be a secondary reason, because it's incredibly hard.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of it's kind of pot luck, because I used to act, and I find the similarities between the two fields very, very similar. In some ways it doesn't matter, this sounds awful, but in some ways it doesn't matter how talented you are. Often it's about luck, how you fit in with the marketplace. Does that agent have a gap for your type of story on their books? And sometimes it's just about being in the zeitgeist. It's not that it's a bad story, it's not that it's badly written.
Absolutely. And there will be very many talented writers who will never be published, you know, for that reason. And then there's very mediocre fiction out there. I won't drop any celebrity names, but it is often who you know, being in the right place at the right time, your book landing on the desk of an editor who happens to be looking for exactly that thing. It's incredibly hard, and you do need to be very lucky.
Yeah. So a really great point that you made there, that first and foremost you've got to write because you love it, and then have that ambition for the income coming in as a secondary or as an addition to that.
Very much so.
That's the bonus. Yeah. So congratulations, you published your first book. You're working on your 6th, which we'll come back to. But do tell us, do you write in series? Do you write standalones? Tell us about what you write.
I haven't quite made up my mind what I am yet. So I've written women's fiction, some quite light-hearted, others fairly heavy-going tearjerkers. And I've also written a crime novel, quite blackly comic, does get quite grisly. So I'm still finding out what I enjoy the most. Currently, I think it is actually killing people. I took way too much pleasure in writing the crime book. But I think when I started 6 years ago, whenever it was, I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm not a trained writer. I have a literature degree, but no training in actual creative writing. So I sat down. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I thought, okay, they say write what you know. So I literally did that, and I wrote about marriage and motherhood and divorce and just everyday life and the funny stuff that happens. But it was more like a book of short stories, really. It was anecdotal sort of episodes from my life. It was quite autobiographical. And my agent, then publisher, helped me turn it into a novel. And that was Lucy Shaw's Not Sure was my first book. Very much my learning curve. And now I kind of cringe when I look back at it, because I had no idea what I was doing. And I have learned as I've gone along with each book. And for the first 2 books, I didn't call myself a writer. You know, my Twitter handle said aspiring writer, even after 2 books had been published.
Now,
I still didn't have the confidence to call myself a writer.
Yes, that's so interesting, because a lot of people do struggle with that.
Yeah.
Just to say out loud, I'm a writer.
Yes.
So even with 2 published books, you still felt that? So.
I still felt that, yeah. And somebody actually pointed out to me, you need to change your Twitter handle. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And people say, what do you do for a living? And I say, well, I'm not really working at the moment, but I write a bit. It's just, it's silly, really. It's just that British thing, isn't it, of not wanting to blow your own trumpet.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also a woman thing as well, that we don't take enough pride, or and it's not even blowing our own trumpet, it's just saying, this is what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm getting better at it. But I've had to force myself. It doesn't come naturally. I just want to hide away and write my books. I don't want to have to actually go out into the world and say, I wrote this, it's quite good, would you read it? And it's almost apologetic. And it's taken a long time for me to start getting past that. I wouldn't say I'm past it yet, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's a learning thing, isn't it? And I feel exactly the same way. I very rarely talk about my own novels, but I'm happy to shout rooftops about somebody else's, or about the craft of writing. But so that's interesting then. So you publish across genres, and I wonder your experience, because I would imagine that if you'd gone with a traditional big house, that they would have said, no, you've got to stick to one genre because we're building a name here. Whereas because you've got more control over what you're writing, you get that freedom that comes with, I want to publish this at the moment, and then I want to go back to my light-hearted stuff, and then switch back to the darker side. Have you had any pushback from your publisher with that, or are they happy for you to?
No, I've been lucky in that they've given me free rein. They don't put me under any pressure. I produce books as and when I feel like it, and I can write pretty much whatever I want. So yes, I suppose from that point of view, it's given me a lot of freedom to write and to find what I enjoy, what I'm best at. I mean, that said, I've got another book coming out, number 5's coming out in a matter of weeks, and that's women's fiction again. It's quite serious women's fiction. But the next one is a sequel to The Right Way to Die. So I think I'm still finding my way, and maybe I will always write across the genre. I don't know. But people do seem to prefer a crime novel. People like a good murder.
Yes, they do seem to. I'm one of them. My hand goes
Me
up
too.
there. But listen, we are here to talk about events as well, because this is something that, whether we like it or not, promoting our own work in one way, shape or form is something that we all have to do if we're indie published, hybrid published, or get a traditional deal. As new writers, we're expected to have an active role in that. And I imagine events is one of those ways of promoting and talking about your novels. So I wonder if you would share with us the types of events that you have attended, talks that you've given, interviews that you've done, that kind of thing.
Yes, of course. Well, I mean, my situation is slightly different because I met my new partner just over a year ago, and he's a photographer. And he was just in the process of giving up his London job to try and make a living from photography. So we've kind of gone into this together, and we do events as a pair, so with his photography and my books, which has made a huge difference to me, because it's much easier to sell somebody else's work, as we've mentioned already. So I can promote his photographs, he can promote my books. So that support factor is huge. So if you've got a friend or family member who will come along with you, because it's really hard to sort of sell your own stuff. We don't want to boast and say, I've written a book, it's great, you should buy it. That's just wholly unnatural. So I've been lucky this last year. I've had Dirk alongside me to do all these events. We do sort of food festivals, we do markets, creative markets, all sorts of events. And I mean, the books tend to only sort of drip out there. You know, you don't sell any vast quantities, but it's a regular sort of stream of income. So that's very easy. But I would say have a friend, have a buddy who will do this with you, even if it's just in the early weeks and months, because it's so hard and scary to do it on your own. But I mean, I told myself maybe 2 years ago, I just had to start saying yes to everything. Whereas before I'd said, oh, no, thanks. Terrifying. I'm saying yes to everything. I'm saying yes to the radio interviews. I'm saying yes to the author talks, which, so writing groups, book clubs will ask me to sort of give them a reading and then have a question and answer session. Literary festivals. I was recently invited to the first Birchington Literary Festival, and it's terrifying. I'm not going to lie. It's still terrifying, even though I've done a handful of them now. You will see me hyperventilating into a paper bag quite often. But once I'm on stage or once I've started, the nerves tend to go and I'm in the zone and I can do it. But beforehand, yeah, terrifying. Audiences tend to be supportive though, and it doesn't matter if you freeze for a moment, if you lose your train of thought, nobody minds. And I think it's real, it's natural. They're there because they want to be there, because they want to engage and they're interested in your books and your story. But it's hard. You have to remind yourself that they are interested. They're there because they want to be. And I don't think that apprehension will ever actually go. I hope it will get easier because we're running out of paper bags. But
so it's funny though, I was talking to my daughter. So as we're filming this is in June. Now it's just been the Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee weekend, and being interviewed was Craig David. He did a set at the Jubilee concert, and they were asking him, was he nervous? Because I mean, it's a huge audience, and it being daylight, you can see right down the Mall, and you can see that number. And he was saying, yes, doesn't matter. He might have been around for 20 years or whatever, but he still gets nervous. And we were talking about how actually that's necessary. You kind of need those bits of nerves to give you that energy, give you that excitement.
Yeah.
And it shows that you care, I think, if you have those nerves, because you want it to go well and you want
Yes, definitely. And it does absolutely, it does show that you care. And I mean, the adrenaline does kick in once I start. And it is like acting, I suppose. It's like going on stage, but when you come off and you have that drop, you feel absolutely shattered for quite some time afterwards, because you have sort of brought it and you've sort of given everything you can because you care. But it's so terrifying and so exhausting. Mm-hmm. But I know it's a necessary part of what I'm doing. I have to get my face out there, my name out there, my books out there. Uh-huh. So I am saying yes to everything. And I recently did a radio broadcast as well. And everyone says, oh, you sound so confident. But inside, my little heart is pitter-pattering and I'm trembling, you know. And I wish it would go away to a degree, but like any stage fright, I don't think it really will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It might lessen, but it'll never disappear. Yeah. And so do you feel that is something that new writers need to do? Is it necessary for new writers to network and attend events like this? And if so, why do you feel that way?
I'm afraid I think it is. And I think writers tend to fall into two sort of camps: the ones who love the attention and they love getting up to read, and then the other camp, which is writers like myself who really just want to quietly get on with their books. But you do come to realise that you will never make a name for yourself. You will never get that break unless you go out and make those connections and you network. And you just have to make yourself known, even if it's only in your sort of local area. From those small acorns, you know, something might happen. But if you're saying no and you're hiding away, it never will. I mean, I had a film producer come up to me at one market and was interested in one of my books, The Right Way to Die. So if I hadn't put myself out there and been at that market, that would have nothing has come of it. He seems to have totally forgotten. But you never know. One event might be that one person who takes your career sort of past that tipping point into something amazing. Mm-hmm. So you have to be prepared to put yourself out there. You have to be able to take rejection. Know that you're not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody's going to read your book and enjoy it. But yes, it is necessary.
Mm-hmm. I guess for people, you've set that differentiation. Definitely, there are writers who love it. They are the extroverts and really, really enjoy it. I think the majority, though, and one of the reasons we love writing so much is that we do tend to be, if not shy, certainly more introverted, and it takes more effort and energy to get out there. But I guess, as you mentioned that you do these things with book clubs, and I would imagine that there's maybe 6 to 10 people in those book clubs, maybe a library reading, it's a small group. And so being able to start with smaller audiences first, and then you can build yourself up.
That's a good point, because it is very scary. So maybe, a group of friends that happen to be at a book club would be a good place to start, because they will give you honest feedback and honest criticism, because it is incredibly daunting. The first one you do, my first one was in London. And I was like, oh, little old me from a little village outside Dover, and I've got to go to London and talk about my first book. And they were called Chicklet and Wine, and they were a lovely group of quite tipsy ladies. And I turned it on for 2 hours, and I read and I answered all their questions, and I made them laugh. And then I had to go and lie down in a darkened room for a week, So yes, maybe starting off small and local is advisable. I threw myself in at the deep end, and
you certainly did
drown.
Baptism of fire, yeah. But Joanna Penn, I don't know if you know her, I follow her quite religiously. She is an introvert, but she sort of made this conscious decision that I'm going to say yes to all of these things. Yeah. I want to get my name out there. But she says exactly that, she'll go to a convention perhaps, or to speak at an event. She gives it her all, and then 3-4 days of no social media, just taking it easy to do that recovery that you've just mentioned.
It's a huge drain. And I think, I don't know, I'd like to get to the point where I can enjoy it, I think, more than anything. Maybe it has got a little easier. I think I managed the last literary festival without the paper bags. So that was progress. But the nerves beforehand are quite debilitating, and I have Rescue Remedy spray on hand. I have a stress relief roll-on that I put on my wrists. And I would just like it to be not quite so terrifying, so that I can relax and enjoy it. And I guess that will come in time. Like anything, practice makes perfect, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's lovely that you've got some tools there that you use to help keep you calm. Not only the paper bag there, but your some of the oils that you use. Which oils do you use?
Well, they're it's a blend actually called Stress Away, which is a rather lovely blend that I use. But yes, any of the calming oils. I have diffusers as well that I burn oils in if I'm particularly stressed. But Rescue Remedy is my best friend, I have to say.
Okay.
I hope you can't overdose on it.
So having established that yes, it's terrifying, but there are ways of helping yourself through it, and that really, if you do want to get your name out there, you do need to start doing these things, because as you've said, you don't know what good stuff is going to come from it. So how do you find these events, thinking about you down in Devon but going to London to do this event, and then doing radio shows and people finding you and you finding them? How does that work? What have you found to be the best ways?
Well, to be honest, so far people have come to me. I've been quite lucky, because I'm very bad at seeking things out, because I don't like to put myself out there. So what I've been lucky at people like Kathy, my friend Kathy, has contacts. She knows a radio presenter, and she will put my name forward. So I think having somebody, as I say, going back to having a supporter, somebody that will ask those questions for you and say, oh, I've got a friend who's a writer, perhaps you might like them to come on your show. That really helps. So if you have got a buddy, because as you say, it's much easier to do things for other people. And I probably wouldn't be doing half the stuff I'm doing were it not for friends pushing me. I would still be just hiding away in my dining room, writing my books and getting nowhere.
And have you noticed now that you've done a few, has word of mouth started to kind of come into effect?
Yes, yeah, very much so. And I regularly have people coming up to me at events saying, oh, I just read that, I loved it. When's your next one out? And that means the world. I might not be making a lot of money from it yet, but I'm getting reviews, positive reviews, and people actually coming to me and saying, oh, loved it. And that means the absolute world. Even if only 2 people do that in my lifetime, it's worth it. Mm-hmm. So it is paying off, and I am sort of a familiar face now in Folkestone, I suppose, because we do a market regularly on a Sunday here, and people do know me now, and they are waiting for my next book to come out, and I have got a little bit of a following, but it's taken 6 years, mostly my own fault because I didn't start doing things early enough, but also the budget constraints as well, because doing events costs money. I mean, I'm lucky in that my partner Dirk tends to pay for the stalls because his stuff takes up 90% of the stall. But again, it's expensive. And most of us impoverished writers can't afford £300 for a 4-day event or whatever, or paying for advertisements, things like that. So, I mean, I think I probably started with social media as my sort of initial foray into the world of trying to put myself out there. And I suppose that's a good place to start, social media.
So tell us, which platforms did you use and how did you go about kind of putting word of mouth out there?
Well, initially, Facebook was the only one I really used. It's still my strongest platform. I created an author page. So I have my personal one and I have my separate author page. And there's the fear that you're going to bore people if you keep posting the same thing and bombarding them. And again, that comes back to confidence. But you just have to keep posting because it takes so many events for people to actually remember you, doesn't it? So Facebook's still my number one, but I use Instagram as well. Haven't quite braved TikTok yet, but I think that'll be the next one. Twitter is brilliant for authors, but for me, it doesn't work. I don't know why. I find that if I do tweet, I don't get any response. And I think you do have to spend time building relationships on Twitter before you get anything back from it. So you need to put some time and dedication into Twitter. Instagram's brilliant. And for me, Facebook. Okay. So you can post little teasers if you've got a new book coming out. You can tease the book cover. You can say where you're going to be. You can post your events. So that's probably the best place to start. And just start slowly getting your name known. And then, maybe find a local book club that would like, because they're going to want to like you, really, because that's just how these things work, isn't it? They haven't got you there to criticise you and judge you. They want to have a good night. So, just do it.
And so we've mentioned the nerves that you have beforehand, and we've mentioned some great techniques for getting over those. And do you find the same? I know you do a lot of in-person events. Over the last couple of years, have you found to have the same nerves if you've done Zoom book clubs and things?
Yes, for me, the nerves are the same, regardless whether I'm in a Zoom call or in person. I think I am a worrier, always have been, and that's just my nature. I suppose I worry that I'm going to fall over my words. I'm not going to read clearly. They're not going to like what I read. There's all these doubts and fears that I think are normal. And I just have to keep giving myself talking to, I was as nervous for this as I would have been for the literary festival. It's no reflection on you.
I'm exactly the same. I mean, normally it's me hosting, I'm the one doing the interviewing. So when I do guest on somebody else's podcast, I feel those nerves again. Lots of deep breaths. I put my essential oils on. I kind of just plow through. And one of the things I love about the author world is that on the whole, everybody's really, really nice and very supportive and wants you to succeed and is interested in what you have to say.
Yes, absolutely. And I haven't actually met anybody that's been horrid to me. Reviews, you can't be everybody's cup of tea, and you have to remind yourself that not everybody will love what you do. But when you get that first negative review, I've had one negative review and it was scathing, and it really, really upset me. It felt very personal, like a personal attack. And for quite a while, it really got to me. And then I had to give myself a bit of a talking to. So, look, you've got 50 good reviews for this book. Don't let one negative one take that away. But again, we're fragile little creatures as writers. And that one negative one is the one that sticks. So you do have to develop a bit of a tough skin to succeed. But you have to really want to do it.
Yeah. I just recommend don't read your reviews, good or bad. I really don't. I've had one that I know of anyway, really bad review, but in a bizarre way, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor, really, because I feel like a genuine author now. I now know this isn't just my friends and family posting reviews now. This is the public.
Yes.
So it makes me feel legit. So I do kind of take a bit of pride in it.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
So we mentioned Zoom calls there and how the last couple of years pandemic has changed, maybe not permanently, but maybe there will be some permanent changes about how events are hosted and held. How did you notice changes over the pandemic? Particularly, I guess with book clubs, that's easily done on a Zoom. But if you were doing a talk of some description, did you find a change there? Were they just cancelled, or did you manage to do some online?
I mean, to be honest, during the pandemic, especially the lockdowns, I didn't do anything except write and sunbathe. So I wasn't really doing much. I mean, I was doing pub quizzes in Zoom, but not very many events at all. In fact, I don't know if I did any actual Zoom events. I use Zoom a lot for other things, for social things. But I think I would have found it hard because you can't make eye contact. You can't read body language quite as well, and you can't engage. So I don't think I would have liked it. I would have done it if I had to, but I would much prefer to be with the people, because you can read the room better and the atmosphere. It's very hard on Zoom. You can't tell if someone's looking at you or not. So for me, real life is better. Although it's scary, it is better.
And have you noticed a shift more generally? So although that you prefer doing face-to-face, have you noticed that there is a bigger call to do things over Zoom just for kind of ease and convenience, or have you noticed people are shifting back to doing face-to-face?
I think it is shifting back to real life. As I say, I recently attended a literary festival, and that couldn't have worked. You know, we had several marquees with several writers giving talks at the same time. We had a book tent, and it was lovely, and there was an atmosphere. You don't get atmosphere on Zoom.
No.
I mean, because I was busy hiding away during the pandemic, I don't really know what was happening in the world of Zoom for events. But I probably would have said no, to be honest.
You would have said no, would you?
I think so.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, my writing group, which I actually feature in one of my books, stopped completely because the lady who ran the group didn't want to do Zoom. So our writing group died as a result of the pandemic completely and hasn't restarted. So I'm sure a lot of groups did go online and probably thrived and may continue with some sort of digital aspect. But for us, it didn't work because I think it was more about the social aspect than any writing that would actually take place, which wasn't very much.
So are you tempted to take the helm and get this started again?
No, because I think I'm having too much fun just writing about it.
But I wonder, if that's actually quite reflective of a lot of groups that have maybe folded over the last 2 years, because it takes someone to drive it forward, doesn't it? If that person doesn't.
I think it's gone one of two ways. Things have either died completely or they have thrived and they found a whole new dimension. I mean, my regular pub quiz became a Friday night online quiz and it's still going as a digital one. So, I think it went one way or the other.
Yeah.
It either really, really made a difference and they could continue and thrive and grow, or they just died and never came back.
So wonderful. So you've talked to us in great detail about events, why they're important, how we can find them, using social media as a way of reaching out, having that buddy there who can be your big support network and quite often do the kind of reaching out for you if you're feeling too nervous to do it yourself. So I think there's some really good starting points you've given people about how to take those first tentative steps that are so important. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
But I'd love to kind of swing back round and just chat a little bit more about your writing. So obviously our listeners can't see you, but I can't believe that you didn't start writing till you were 49. And that was a few years ago. You're looking wonderful.
I'm 55 this year and feeling every minute of it at the moment.
You don't look it, I can assure you.
Oh, thank you. Very late starter. But somebody told me, I met up with someone I hadn't seen since 1983. And he said, yeah, you told me in 1983 that you were going to be a writer. Took me a blooming long time to actually get there. And I'm incredibly proud to have written 5 novels and had them published. Oh. But yeah, I wish I'd started 30 years ago. Of course I do. But there's no point thinking like that. I got around to it eventually. And
it was meant to be. The universe took you the way it was meant to be. Exactly. So I love to hear you say, you know, I'm very proud of the 5 books that I've published. I'd love for you to share with us, if you can, so I often say that writing the first draft of my first novel changed my life. Not in that instant, in that moment, but when I look back at my time since then, I can see how that's changed my life. I wonder, publishing your books, has that sort of spilled over into other parts of your life? Can you see changes that have occurred since you published that first book that you perhaps wouldn't have anticipated at the beginning?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, for a start, I wouldn't have met my partner because I joined a creative group when I moved to Folkestone, and he was a member of that creative group. So had I not been a writer, we would never have met, for starters. I would never have met my friend Kathy, who gives me a kick up the bum when I need to be saying yes to things. So yes, certainly the group of people I've met, I would never have met if I was still married and doing my old job as an events manager. But has it changed me? I don't think it has. I really don't think it has. I'm proud, and it's what I want to do forever. I may need to get a proper job to pay the bills as well. But I'm just relieved that I finally got round to it and I didn't keep making the excuses and putting it off. Mm-hmm. But I'm the same old Jo.
And so when you started writing that first book, when you kind of said, okay, this is it, I'm going to take advantage of this, you said you'd just been made redundant. So did you find that, because that's a whole change in sort of scheduling, that's a whole change in your time, how you manage your time and use your time. Did you find that transition quite easy? Did you have other things to negotiate within your life around that? Because one of the things I often hear is time is a problem. I've got a job, I've got kids, I've got caring responsibilities, I don't have time to write. And I always say, well, you know, we're all busy. It's about finding that space, making that space for yourself. How did you find that transition into being a full-time writer?
I mean, my situation probably wasn't normal. My marriage had broken up. I'd had to leave the marital home. I lost my job. My car was written off. Literally everything was taken from me. So it was a case of I've got to write and I've got to make it work because I have nothing else left. And I mean, my son was just starting secondary school, so he didn't really need me as much. And so, yeah, it wasn't typical. The main worry for me was money. How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to live? Mm-hmm. So ultimately, I did have to get a proper job and write alongside. But because I'd lost everything else, time wasn't an issue. I had all the time in the world, really. Motivation was tough sometimes because I was going through an awful lot personally.
Yeah.
But in some ways, writing probably saved me because it was an escape. It was something to focus on. And while I'm writing, I'm not thinking about all the other stuff that's going on in my life or in the world at large. Uh-huh. So it probably saved me, I think, to a degree.
Uh-huh. And so then when you did get a job, you know, a job, how did you balance that writing and working at the same time? And even though your son was older, they still demand a lot of us. So how did you negotiate all of those things?
You've just got to find time because you want to do it. If you haven't got the drive and the motivation, you're never going to find time. You're going to find excuses. Mm-hmm. But I had no social life or anything, so evenings were good. Early mornings were good. And I mean, I can write anywhere. I do tend to write as a sort of fairly solitary writer, but I can write anywhere. So lunch breaks, behind the bar in the pub I was working in part-time, jotting down ideas. So for me, time wasn't really an issue because I didn't have much else going on in my life at the time. Makes me sound like a right sado.
But there is a degree of that. There is, and I think this is something that I do want people to kind of recognise, that it is a big investment in time and energy to write a novel, to get to the finish line. We can often start novels with a lot of excitement and we're gung-ho for the first few weeks, but getting past that middle bit and getting to the end is the really tricky bit. And it can mean cutting out on social events. It can mean spending more time at home. But it's and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, it's temporary though. When you're first drafting, that's often the most intense bit. And when you do need that the real brain power, actually, because you're creating something out of nothing. But that only lasts for 2 or 3 months, maybe 6 months at the most. And then you get to kind of come back into the real world and breathe again. And the revisions, you can kind of do them anywhere. It's not as difficult. It's not using as much of that brain power as it was to do the first drafting. That's what I've found anyway. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, no, I would totally. But then, I've written books that have taken 10 weeks to write. I've written books that have taken a year because I've had other things happening. The Right Way to Die took 10 weeks. I wrote it during the first lockdown. I had a wonderful time. Wrote in the morning, sunbathed in the afternoon. It was bliss. Whereas Giraffe Thing took me a year because I'd met my partner. I'd moved house. We were doing events left, right and centre. And every time I went back to it, I had to reread it because I couldn't remember what was going on. So it varies, and I don't tend to put myself under too much pressure. But when I then do sit down to write, I enjoy it. I'm ready. So, but yeah, you have to want to do it, and it's not easy, and you have to find some discipline from somewhere. And some days I'll spend an hour looking at my split ends, But once you start and you get in that zone, it's the best feeling in the world, and you'll get to sort of 6 o'clock in the evening and you'll realise you haven't eaten and you haven't drunk and you've just forgotten time, and and it's working then, and that's the best feeling in the world.
Yes, that is. Oh, lovely. I'm curious, just before we wrap up, I'd love to know, what is one of the most interesting questions you've had from one of your book groups or someone who's come up to you at a festival?
Oh my goodness, that's put me on the spot. Well, lots of people say, can I be in your book? And I know my normal response is yes, as long as you don't mind me killing you off.
And what do they say?
Nobody's safe. Okay. Nobody's safe in this town. But mostly it's the same old questions, what got you started? Where do your ideas come from? Just sort of normal. I can't think of any exceptional questions, really.
One will come to you as soon as
we hang up, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're about to publish book 5, is that right?
Yes, so Bonfire Buddleia.
What can you tell us about it?
That book. So the idea was born in my old back garden. I was gardening and I had a bonfire patch and nothing had ever grown there in 7 years. And suddenly a buddleia had shown up, as they do, they grow anywhere. So the Bonfire Buddleia immediately clicked into my brain. Didn't know what the story was going to be about at that time. But for that book, the title came first, and it's about 3 sisters, historic abuse and a missing girl. Not many laughs in this one. Bit of a tearjerker, some really sensitive topics. I get goosebumps thinking about it. That's currently being proofread. Cover design is in, which is always exciting. So yeah, no laughs, but I hope that people will enjoy it. It's quite a challenging read. But I think I've handled it sensitively. I hope I have.
I'm sure you have. And I love a good old tearjerker. It's very cathartic, isn't it? So where can listeners find out more about you and your books online?
Well, if you Google Jo Bavington-Jones, I'm the only one out there. You'll find all my social media. All my books are available on Amazon. They obviously Kindle as well. I welcome any contact via social media or my website. So I'm very easy to find, very approachable. And yeah, if anybody would like to know more, please get in touch. I'd be more than happy to let them know what I'm all about.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes for people if they're interested to find out more.
Thank you.
I'm similar to you. I have a very unusual surname, and that has its advantages. You know, that we're easy to find.
We are.
Lovely, Jo. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely speaking to you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Emma.
If you're a first-time novelist who is struggling to either finish your novel or get those revisions to where you want them to be, then I've got just the thing for you. I have a small group coaching program which runs over 12 months, and over the course of that program I will help you fix those plot problems that you've been struggling with. I'll help you get under the surface of your characters so you really get to know them and what's driving them. And crucially for you, I give you that self-belief that you need to get you through the roller coaster that is writing a novel, so that you can carry on, get to the end, and get your book, your story out into the world so it can change people's lives. If that sounds good to you, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, I know I can help you get to where you want to be. So book a call with me, let's have a chat and see if we are a good fit for each other. If you're interested in doing that, then go to emmadesi.com/story builder. I look forward to chatting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.